Morning world, it's 22nd of January 2020. It's about 9:30 in the morning at UK time. This is the first of three videos I'll be doing this morning. I want to look at the state of play so far in 2020, first of all. On a personal note, I mean, as many of you are aware, I had a personal tragedy at the start of this year when one of my best friends died, and when he died, he was the guy who looked after my email, my website. So a lot of stuff went down for me. I'm slowly reclaiming everything. I'm back up to mid-December. So anyone who's sort of contacted me before mid-December and hasn't got hold of me yet, or I haven't contacted them, just drop me a line. The new email is on my Facebook page. It's basically steve@stevejudd.co, not .com. So, at the start of this year, or at the very end of last year, I did a global forecast for 2020, and I said that 2020 was going to be a pretty crazy year, and I was probably a little bit less polite than that. It is proving to be so. I also stated that by the time we're into the end of January, for many people, the hardest time of 2020 is over. There are a few dates in the rest of the year that I just want to draw attention to and reflect on now from the perspective of having been into 2020 for 3 weeks already. This is primarily of interest to those of you with a basis of astrological knowledge, but I will try and keep it astro light so that everyone gets a flavour of what I'm talking about. I'm looking at a few dates in the future. Firstly, and primarily now, I am looking at the time when Mars moves into Capricorn. Now, Mars moves into Capricorn in mid-February and will leave at the end of March. Bearing in mind that at the same time, Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto will also be in Capricorn. So there's going to be a time between about the 17th of February through to about the 21st, 22nd of March, where we're going to have Mars, Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto all in Capricorn. Now that is a pretty big grouping of planets to have in one sign, especially as they're all quite projective and assertive. There's nothing delicate, soft and gentle about those energies. So it's pretty clear to me that the pace of life isn't going to be calming down. Now, as Mars moves into Capricorn, there will be a particular time when it will hit two of those big three planets very strongly indeed. And I'm particularly looking at the time around the Northern Hemisphere spring equinox, the Southern Hemisphere autumn equinox, the time around the 21st and the 22nd of March. Mars will be at 23 degrees of Capricorn. Jupiter will be at 23 degrees of Capricorn. Pluto will be at 24 degrees of Capricorn. So there's going to be a Mars-Jupiter-Pluto conjunction with less than 1.5 degrees separating them. We should actually be able to see the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in the sky, which will be quite interesting. That will be about a couple of hours before dawn, wherever you are in the world. That should be nice to look at. But what does it mean? Mars conjunct Jupiter, not a big deal. It's fairly common, and it generally brings a lot of enthusiasm and vibrancy and hope into people's charts and into their lives. But when you put Pluto into the mix, Jupiter conjunct Pluto is a generally beneficial aspect in that it expands the desire for psychological depth and understanding. It really encourages the deep diving and deep mining of one's own psychological self-analysis. It gives one excellent ability to understand what's going on in the outside world, to see the big picture. But when you add Mars into the mix, Mars conjunct Pluto especially, there is something surgical, scalpel-like, laser-like about it. And it may well be that at that time, around the equinox, there is a degree of immediacy, intensity, and extremism going on in various levels around the world, whether it's political, economic, military. There's something surgical about this time that caused me concern, and I suspect that when viewed against the backdrop of what else has been going on this year so far, I suspect we're going to see a ramping up and an acceleration of what's already been developing politically, economically. And I am worried about the global economy this year. I do think we're coming in for some type of major shift and correction in the way that we manage our economies, both locally and globally. At the very end of June, Mars will move into Aries, and then it will stay there until January of next year. Mars normally stays in Aries for 6 weeks every 2 years. This year, Mars is going to be in Aries 27 weeks. 28 if you count early January next year. This is quite a challenging position because Mars, yes, it rules Aries. It's very comfortable in Aries. It's very dynamic in Aries, but 27 weeks? During that time, it will go retrograde and it will square Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto 3 times. The final square to Jupiter and Saturn won't come until they've moved into Aquarius and Mars has moved into Taurus, or at least at the very end of that time, which will be around mid-January of next year. So I'm not too worried about the final square. I am concerned around the final square from Mars in Aries to Pluto, which will take place around the Christmas time, around the 23rd to the 26th of December. More importantly than that, and perhaps the most single dynamic time of the year, and definitely a time for your notebooks and diaries, is the time around the new moon in October, around the 16th of October, when we have the Sun and Moon at 23 degrees of Libra, Mars at 20, nearly 21 degrees of Aries, Saturn at 25 degrees of Capricorn, Jupiter at 19 degrees of Capricorn, Pluto at 22 degrees of Capricorn. So the Sun and Moon will be opposite Mars, squaring Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto. This is about as surgical as it gets. This is a pinpoint, a moment of time, which has the potential to be extremely incisive. And there is nothing gentle about this. I know the new moon in Libra is supposed to be a time of balance and harmony, but when it's opposite Mars and square that gigantic mashup in Capricorn, then there's nothing gentle about this. It's going to cause quite a degree of irritation, impatience, frustration, impotence in a number of different ways. And as a result, the pressure for spontaneous sudden action is going to probably erupt at that time. And I do consider that particular time, the middle 10 days of October, to be perhaps the most critical time of 2020. Stepping back to where we're coming up to in the short-term future, with 4 planets in Capricorn at the individual level, well, look at your own horoscope. Look at the house of the zodiac that the second half of Capricorn occupies. This will be the only time of your life where you will have Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto all in the same area, all very close to each other, all within 6, 7 degrees, 5 degrees, 6 degrees of each other. So that area of your chart, the second half of Capricorn, the house that it's in, shows signs of becoming really active and dynamic as you get into mid-late March and an extremely projective time. So for those of you that are astute enough to capitalize on this and to use your energy so that it doesn't use you, then you're going to find that you've got a great deal more drive, enthusiasm, vitality, and you can bring a lot of positive development, growth and change into your personal life. If you don't use this energy, then it will use you, and that's when things like bumps, bangs, bruises, burns, broken bones, arguments, disagreements, irritation and frustration happen. Take that out of a personal and put it into the global, and that seems a bit of a worrying time. We shall see. But meantime, here we are. We're in the end, coming to the end of January, and it's crazy out there at the moment. Let's see what the rest of the year brings. Catch you later, world. 2 more videos straight after this one.